Hi guys, I'm Ananya, and today I'm going to be doing problem number 6, zigzag conversion. So, given a string like PayPal is hiring and a number of rows like 3, what we need to do is we need to transform the string into a zigzag configuration and then read it row by row. In this problem, they've given us two examples, the first of which is PayPal is hiring and a number of rows being 3, and they've also drawn out the zigzag configuration for us, with the first row having the letters P-A-H-N, second row has A-P-L-S-I-I-G, and the last row has Y-I-R, which is the exact order that we read the letters in and return them. Another thing that I noticed is that s.length and num rows are both going to be less than or equal to 1,000, so that makes me think that brute force is a very valid solution here. What I think is so nice about this problem is the fact that the brute force solution might just be the most optimal solution. No matter what we try here, we're going to have to go through every single character in the original string at least once, so the most optimal solution is going to have a time complexity of O of n. In the brute force solution, what we're going to be doing is creating a character array and just simulating the zigzag process. So the first part we need to do is figure out the dimensions of the character array. Technically, we could get lazy here and just use the maximum possible dimensions and hard code it. We know that the maximum number of rows is going to be 1,000, and by extension, since we know the maximum length of S is 1,000, we can do 1,000 over 1 equals 1,000 columns. But I'm trying to optimize just a little bit here, so let's try to figure out the actual number of rows and columns that we have. Num rows is given in the problem, but num columns is what we need to find. So what I've done here is I'm just going to declare a variable n, which is equal to s.length for simplicity in writing. The first thing that pops out to me with this zigzag problem is the fact that there is a little repeat or cyclic repeat that I can find here. The cyclic repeat just includes the vertical column plus the diagonal that follows it. So in total, I think that's num rows plus num rows minus 2 elements. So I'm going to declare a variable called cycle length set equal to num rows plus num rows minus 2. And with this, I believe that I can now find the total number of columns. So the first thing I'm going to do is figure out how many columns are taken up with the cycles that we have. So it's going to be num columns equals n over cycle length times num rows minus 1. And the reason I think num rows minus 1 is just because we need to include the column plus all the elements that follow it. It's going to be 1 plus num rows minus 2, which is equal to num rows minus 1. The second thing we need to add is the elements that are not in a full cycle. So I think there's two cases here. The first is where we only have enough elements to fill one column, which is the vertical. And the second case here is where we have more than enough elements to fill not only that column, but a couple columns after that in the diagonal. So case 1 is going to be where n mod cycle is less than num rows, and the second case here is going to be where n mod cycle is greater than num rows. The first case means we only have to allocate one additional column, so I'm going to set that one equal to 1. And the second case is where we have to allocate, we have more than enough elements. So let's pretend we just deleted the first few elements preceding num rows and allocated all those to a single column. Then all we need to do is return the maximum of 1 or n mod cycle minus num rows plus 1, which would be the maximum of case 1 or case 2. Alright, so now it seems like all we need to do is figure out the logic for simulating the zigzag pattern, and then we can go ahead and code up this problem and return it. You'll notice that even if you were to simulate the zigzag process on your own, the way that you add letters to each row doesn't really change. You're only adding letters up and down and up and down. The only thing that really changes is the column that you add your letter to. For example, when we hit the bottom of a vertical, we have to increment the column letter by letter until we reach the top and can begin a new vertical. So what we really need in our program is two for loops, one that goes from the top of a column to the bottom of a column, and the other going from the bottom of a column to the top of the column for when we add the diagonal portion. Additionally, we also need a counter to keep track of which column we're adding the letter to, and we'll increment it every time we finish a vertical. The first thing I'm going to do is declare variable n equal to s.length for simplicity's sake. Okay, now after this, we already know off the bat that if n is less than or equal to 1, or num rows is equal to 1, we can just return the string as it is. Alright, now I think we can start solving for int cycle length. Cycle length is going to be equal to num rows plus num rows minus 2. And now num calls is going to be equal to n over cycle length times num rows minus 1, as we discussed before. And we're going to add in the maximum of n mod cycle length. Let me just make this an int first. N mod cycle length minus num rows plus 1. And the reasoning for that is discussed before as well. Alright, now what we need to do is we need to declare our vector. So vector of vector car ants equals num rows, and then it's a vector of car. Let's make this num calls, and let's pre-fill everything to 0. After this, what we're going to do is we're going to declare our int I equals 0, and then our other variable is equal to call equals 0, and then let's start off our while loop. While I is less than n, meaning we have some elements left in the string, we're going to declare our first for loop going down, for loop going up. This is the diagonal one. Okay, for loop going down, int j equals 0. J less than num rows, and I is less than n. You can also do this in a for loop in C++. What we need to do is we need to set answer j call to equal s of I, and then also increment I after we leave. At the very end of this for loop, we also have to increment call just once so that we can start the diagonal on a new column. And then this one needs to start int j equals to num rows minus 2. J is greater than 0 because we can't let it hit 0. That would be the first row, and that's not allowed. And I is less than n. J minus minus, and then answer of j call equals s of I. And we need to increment I as we go and column as we go. So yeah, that should be it for the while loop. And then now I think we can just read the entire num rows I for int j equals 0, j less than num calls j plus plus. This one should be if answer of I j is not equal to 0, then we can add, oh, I never declared a final string. Final equals that. Final plus equals answer I j. Alright, and then return final. Let's just make sure we have everything done correctly. Answer num rows, vector car, num calls. Int is not a function or a pointer. Oh, cycle length. Alright, all 3 cases passed. Let's do a moment of truth. Yay!